You
Okay,
need to trigger.
All right, we are ready to begin.
So,
We're gonna call it order at 5:30 PM on the dot. And so if we could, let's go ahead and start our roll call. And well, let's go ahead. Who's online? Stella?
Here.
Great, thanks. Hillary?
Brooklyn McReynolds.
Kathy Cook.
Daphne Retzloff.
Karen Adiker, Sherry Wilkins, Wendy Goodwin,
Lauren Howard.
Mark Brown, good evening.
Ruth Weigel,
Haley Ortega. Jenny Wilson.
Farouk.
Hi, Jen Burbidge, Director of Parks, Culture, and Recreation, and we have Carter Gibson, Executive Assistant over here at the staff table, Jamie Oakland, Parks Maintenance Supervisor with Public Works, and we have Chelsea Yarwood, who is a county manager with the city as well.
Okay.
And
Somebody
we wanted to
else.
note that we have another commissioner. coming in.
James Eichner just walked in.
Hello.
Hello. Hey.
All good, welcome.
All right, is there anyone that would like to read the land acknowledgement? Thank you.
The Parks Improvement Funding Workgroup meets on the ancestral land of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Nisqually Indian Tribe and Squaxin Island Tribe. We acknowledge and remember those tribal people not recognized today who were absorbed or relocated into other tribes for survival. We recognize the ancestors and their descendants who are still here. We recognize and respect the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek as the traditional stewards of this land since time immemorial and their role today in taking care of these lands in perpetuity. We recognize and have the responsibility to call attention to the histories of dispossession, forced removal, and abridged treaty rights that allowed our nation, state, and city to develop as they have today. We recommend that community members read the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854.
Thank you so much. All right, and we did have someone join us late. And sir, could you introduce yourself? Did you want to introduce yourself?
And Jim Eichner.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jim. All right, the next thing we're going to move on to is a need to get an action for a motion to approve the agenda.
Move approval of the agenda.
Mark, and may I get a second?
I'll second it, Sherry Wilkins.
And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so moved, thank you. And then our next thing is, excuse me, we need a motion to approve the minutes from the 10/28/24 meeting.
So move.
Thank you, Mark. Can we get a second?
I'll second it, Sherry Wilkins.
Sherry, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Okay, thank you, so moved. So under our public comment, we did receive one written public comment and it was forwarded to all work group members. So thank you very much for that. And
Did
now,
everybody know who that was from?
well, if you don't, you can always Google. But yes,
You,
I think.
along that Dusty Pierpoint, our former police chief, took the time to send us some comments.
Oh, he did? Okay.
Yeah, you might want to take a look at it when you have time, if you haven't already. And then we are going to get down to our business items and we're going to do a work group recap with Jen Burbidge, our director.
All right, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here again. Let me just share my screen here for our recap. So that's-
I think maybe just hit okay. Yeah.
Thank you. I think maybe Zoom updated. I believe it looks a little bit different, so. Okay. All right, well, thank you again. As you know, we'd like to do this recap so that we can all be on the same page and just see if there's any questions from the last few meetings. And this one is going to be a little bit longer, and I'll tell you why as soon as I go through the challenges and the funding options here. So as we know, we have challenges in maintaining current services. There's a lot of deferred maintenance and aging infrastructure in the Lacey Parks Culture and Recreation system. We've got aging infrastructure, and then couple that with Lacey's growing population and then meeting the community needs. Oh, hi, John. Welcome. And then we talked a lot about Lacey needing sustainable, dedicated park funding. We've also talked about to, be able to provide this type of system that we have to the public. It is $10.1 million. That's 2024 budget. And we do have existing challenges keeping up with services at this rate. This is, we know that with operating revenues, we only bring in the 1.6 million. And we know that this is typical for park systems. We keep things affordable to the public. There's many, many things, obviously, like our parks that are free to the public. And that's typical. We just, have to figure out how to rise to this challenge and figure out how to move forward. We do have our Parks Capital Improvement Program, our PCIP, which between the new capital projects and replacement project is, over $80 million. And we know that there are other things around the corner we talked about on the horizon, right? When Jamie updated this of like, this is a 6-year list. And so there's a lot of other maintenance items coming around the corner. So our solutions here are, that all of these projects in the PCIP do require some type of public funding and prioritization. We generally know what the community wants. We've talked about needing that sustainable dedicated funding, which is why we're here with the work group, and we really appreciate your efforts and focus on this challenge that we have, but that is reviewing parks expansion and replacement projects identified in that PCIP, analyzing available funding options and making recommendations to the Lacey City Council. And as you know, that's going to be culminating here in December. What I wanted to do and what I kind of alluded to earlier is that just touch back on that public input and some of the stakeholder key takeaways that came out of that comprehensive plan effort. And during the activity last week, some of the groups asked for a reminder about the key takeaways. We've done a great job at stating them quite a bit in this recap in the past. But what I want to show you tonight is more of a direct correlation between what those key takeaways are and the PCIP projects. And you all even talked about it last week of wanting that reminder and making sure that, if I think the comment was specifically if the work group is recommending something to a public voter request, it's very important that this group understands what the public has, really provided as input. So wanting to make sure we do that. And as you know, it's really challenging to balance public need with the current, needs and replacement needs. And so you guys have done just such a great job in considering the maintenance and operation. And we've heard it many, many times as we've gone through activities that you're really considering that. So thank you for that. And we understand that it is a very big challenge. So top themes from public input. Aquatics and indoor facilities. So here on the screen, you'll see there's a photo of a pool, a spray park, and an indoor playground. I'll start with this upper left photo. Many of you know the city schedules North Thurston Public Schools pools for public lessons and swim opportunities after school and after the school sports teams are finished, and then also during the summer and on the weekends. But these pools are cooler temperature because they're designed for physical education and for like swim teams. And so what we're hearing from the public is they want warm temperature pools, a warm temperature pool for lessons, and then some of the play features, kind of like what's pictured here. Think of like a 0 depth entry for the little ones. There in the middle is a spray park. So these are less expensive, kind of a fun way to get access for families and kids to water. Of course, it's not a pool, but access to water nonetheless. And then pictured up here in the upper right is an indoor playground. And what we heard from folks is that, you know, because it rains here all the time, there is a need for kids and families to have these indoor spaces to be able to climb and play and burn energy. And so those three themes that I just pointed out do relate directly to that Young Child and Family Center of Lacey project. I've highlighted those ones. So this is the PCIP right here with the 29 projects. So the pool and indoor playground and then a spray park. So I put those in blue because they relate directly to that Young Child and Family Center project. I'm actually gonna show the video from the Joint City Council North Thurston Public School Board meeting 2 weeks ago to show just how many partners are actively working together for this project. And we have touched on this project a few times with this group, but haven't given it really as much time as it needs to give you a full sense of the volume of community stakeholders involved with the project. And then also to clarify, you know, $5 million obviously is not full funding for a pool. But you'll see in the video, it's being planned as a future component of the Young Child and Family Center. That community groups, including the city, are working together to try to get it funded and putting those puzzle pieces together. I also want to clarify, it would be owned by North Thurston Public Schools, and as would the indoor playground. And so what that does is essentially Lacey Parks would contribute $5 million to the project in partnership with the school, with North Thurston Public Schools, the YMCA, and other partners to build a pool and or indoor playground. And just a reminder that the pool was a top priority. And we think this is the best way as staff recommendation, like to move forward without the city taking on that maintenance and operations of a pool, is really coming to the table and saying, what can everybody bring to this project? And there's potential ways that the city can come in later, and that's in the video as well, as far as like the Defense Communities Infrastructure Program grant, which is not a given, but that's, you know, the most viable path forward for the city to be able to bring in big funding for the project. But you know, the full funding package is not put together yet, so that would still need to be done. But the other thing I want to highlight on this slide is that the Lacey Museum and Cultural Center project is, well, sorry, before I skip to that, I just want to show how the spray park is related. You'll also see in the video that there is a spray park scheduled for that Young Child and Family Center campus. And this could be the first one that's in Central Lacey, is located at the same location. And the concept is for that wellness hub for kids and families. And so healthier families equals healthier kids, and really supporting not only the young child, but the family as well. And then of course, the other spray parks that are listed here, the concept there would be that to provide more access to water for people spread out through the city, there could be additional spray parks at different locations. And that's something that's typical that other municipalities do, to be able to kind of spread out the access.
Yeah, may I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Over $500,000 for the spray parks. So it's gonna be in the video, kind of what they're gonna look like?
Well, no, we just have photos of what a spray park looks like.
Would that be comparable to other spray parks in the
Yes.
county?
Yes, so the $500,000 amount is based on kind of what the city of Olympia has done in their with their spray parks, and then there's escalation for, 500,000 is like the current, was the 2023 number. And so then it's adding in escalation, knowing that the projects aren't gonna happen for a while. Yeah, you're welcome. So just wanted to kind of tie those pieces together. Yeah.
One super quick question.
Yeah,
With the pool run and managed by North Thurston Public Schools, it will still be a warm water pool. It wouldn't be
Yeah.
converted into like athletics or anything with the schools, correct?
That's correct. And so the school district, so the concept that the partners have discussed is that the school district would own the building, the YMCA would operate it. And the city could come in with a capital contribution. So that's what that potential is, that you see listed there in parentheses. But the spray park, and the reason that one's on a different line is that the city would actually install that one and operate. So you'll see that there is M&O associated with that one. But obviously, it's a lot lower than what M&O for a pool would be. You know, the pool could be estimated around $1 million a year for operations. And then just to point out, and this is where I was going a little bit earlier, but I jumped ahead, the Lacey Museum and Cultural Center also is indoor recreation space as well. It's more focused on cultural and heritage programs, obviously, and museum exhibits than more of that active play. So I highlighted that. And so this is one of the slides in the presentation I'm going to show you. And the reason I'm bringing this one up separately than the video is because it's inadvertently skipped over on the video. We just didn't advance the slides. And so I just want to show, these are the partners that have been at the table for the past 2 years working on this project. And then also ESD 113, Bezos Academy, and the Thurston County Child Care Action Council have come to the table in addition to these groups as well, just recently. That, I think I have to stop sharing then share again, is that right? Or no, I should just, okay, let's see if this works.
My laptop right there. I thought about turning it today.
With that, let's go right into our first agenda item, which is our Young Child and Family Center update.
Huh?
Then,
Yeah, good, okay. You might help me. Right.
Sure. Just go to the. Oh, do that. Go ahead. It's already pulled up.
Thank you. Let's see.
council members, board members, city and district leaders, and community members who have joined us. I'm Sean Dotson, Assistant Superintendent of Operations
Oh, sorry, I'm trying to get rid of this thing down here.
for North Thurston Public Schools.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jen Burbidge, Director of Parks, Culture, and Recreation for the City of Lacey. And Sean's going to get us started, and then I'm going to come in later in the presentation.
All right, well, we're excited to give you an update on the Young Child and Family Center and our progress on this project. And this project, it really is a unique collaboration between a variety of agencies, many of whom you see here, but there are others who have come to the table. We continue to hear interest from other partners who want to find a way to help with this project. Really?
I'm gonna try sharing again because it looks like it's not.
I think the internet is lagging.
Oh.
There were so many outages today.
All of these agencies recognize a similar need for services for our young children and families in the community, whether it's a shortage of preschool programs, wellness needs, recreational needs, and family education. And this project is an attempt to work together rather than working separately to meet those needs. And to share a little bit about that, that has led to a vision for this project and a set of goals that are really meant to meet that aim. We want to make sure we create an open and accessible space that will serve up to 600 preschool age children while also sharing amenities with the public during and outside school hours. So we can work with the public in a variety of areas, and you'll see that played out in the space in a moment. We want a space that supports diversity and inclusion, really equitable spaces for our students, adults, and the greater community. And that's looking at the classroom spaces and all of the support spaces and play spaces that we put together here. We want to make sure we're fostering community engagement. This is a partnership, and so that is threaded throughout the development of this project, and that requires flexibility. And because we have, thankfully through the support of our voters, and we'll get back onto that in just a moment, but with the support of our voters, we have funding to go forward with a significant portion of this project, but we can't do it all right now. And with that, we need a space that can be easily expanded to adapt to changes in the future, opportunities to expand and more fully realize the vision, and to build and have building systems and materials that support really sustainability of the site and focus on health, because this is also intended as a wellness hub in order to help us meet those educational, social, emotional, mental, and physical needs of our children and families. That is all a part of the vision of this space, and hopefully you'll see that as we show you an image of where we are right now. To give you a quick look at the timeline for the project, really early conversations around the Young Child and Family Center started back in about 2022, and we started bringing together partners to support this project. Through grant funding and through support from our voters, we've reached the point where the grant funding helped us to move forward with concept design, and we're able to move forward with really building the first portion of this project. So where we are right now, and that's the second dot you see on the side here, is we're at the schematic design phase of this project, where we're starting to take the big ideas and figure out how they all fit together. And we'll get throughout this year into deeper and deeper depth until we really have a refined plan for that project, with construction documents next spring, early site work beginning next summer, and then moving to construction by next winter and through the spring of 2027 with a plan to open that in the summer of 2027. So that's the general timeline for taking this forward. And to give you a sense of the site, we're setting this just north of Nisqually Middle School on a large piece of property that the district owns there, just off of Marvin Road. And this is, as you know, a very busy hub of our community with the RAC right across the street, our regional athletic complex, a future single-family residential neighborhood straight across the street, and additional future athletic fields to the south. And if you've been to any of our middle schools, including coming tonight, you know they are hubs of a lot of activities and athletics for our community, both school and community-based activities. So it's an exciting site for this project. To give you a look at where we are in the planning right now, what we have envisioned is a building that will have 3 classroom wings, and what you're seeing is not the whole thing, so each picture will build on this, but 3 classroom wings, each that would have up to 8 classrooms. So if we get the full build out, that would allow 24 classrooms. You see arrows representing doors out of those with the covered play spaces off of each classroom to allow the kids to have some outside play. And you see where it's labeled as outdoor learning between those wings. We're still working on that concept, but I'll show you a bit of a vision of what that could be in the future. And a central play area in the middle of this facility for our students during the day. You see Marvin Road just to the bottom of the picture with the parking lot coming off of Marvin. In front of each of those classroom wings, we're working on having gross motor spaces where you can have free play, or students that you might need physical therapy. And these are flexible spaces that allow for some of those types of community partnership programs that we talked about, wellness programs, other things. That gives us a really flexible space. And they're all connected by hallways. So this is all interior. It's not going outside from building to building. It's just to help you see. So with an administrative space you see in the yellow on that slide, that is where our families would come in. It provides a secure entry and a secure space for the school during the school day. And then at the other end of this U-shaped building, you see a library that we are working with Timberland Regional Library around operating. And the community can come into that library, and with the hallway up there, it allows for students to come in from the student side, for us to secure that space either way, and to have the ability for us to have students in, to have community in, or through a reading room to be able to accommodate both in the times that we need to. You see a courtyard in the front of that space between the parking lot and the building. And I should go back. This is the part of the project that we have funding at this stage to build, which is really exciting. There's a lot here that's going to create some of those partnerships right off the bat. To fully realize the vision, there's an opportunity to build a future rec center that could meet our aquatics or indoor play or a variety of those community needs, a combination thereof, as we figure out together how to make that project a reality. And with this courtyard, what we envision, you see that the play area inside is intended to be fenced so that we have some security for kids during the school day, but that they can play. And as you come in off of it, you're really seeing that, that it becomes a community focus. But then outside of that, even when school's in, you have the opportunity to potentially have a splash pad or other play equipment. It's hard to on this scale envision this, but this is a large courtyard area actually. And through that, when school's out, the opportunity to open those gates and have the inside also be potentially a play area. So there's a lot of opportunity for that collaboration in this space. To give you a sense of what that could look like, this is Olympic View Elementary in Federal Way School District. Some of our staff visited this as we were looking at it. What they've done is they've really done for those outdoor education areas, they've created some nature spaces for kids to have the opportunity to interact with nature, flora and fauna that they can actually touch and feel and experience, as well as community gardens. So we're working on that vision right now, but really see some opportunity for that to really enhance, and outdoor education for young children has huge potential and is high interest. And so an opportunity we're exploring and seeking to develop through this project. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jen.
We're gonna switch spots here for the microphone. All right, and here you just see some images of.
Sorry. I think this is just meant to help you really see what we're looking to create in terms of feel of the project. I apologize.
Yeah, no, that's okay. No, it's all good. Just some images there. And so this will sound familiar to our council members because this is a similar update to the last one. During 2021 through 2023, as you know, the Parks, Culture, and Recreation Department engaged the community with outreach and communication to close communication gaps that might have existed regarding priorities and to inform the 2023 comprehensive plan update. Some of those key takeaways that we found do match up with the Young Child and Family Center project, and those are aquatics opportunities, particularly for families with the warmer temperatures, indoor facilities such as indoor pool and indoor playground, as you see pictured over there on the right, outdoor spray parks, and in addition to trails and preservation of natural areas, and then completion of planned sports fields. And the city council engaged in a couple of discussions this past, over the past year in regards to parks funding strategy, and those were in April and May. And as you know, directed staff to work on a resolution for an ad hoc parks improvement funding work group. And that work group was put together with the help of a council committee, and recommended to the full council. And that group is very much underway. We are meeting twice a month, and that group will be making recommendations to council in December as planned. The work group is reviewing all the projects in the Parks Capital Improvement Program, which is a part of that comprehensive plan that I just mentioned. And so there could be potentially a city contribution depending on the outcome of that group and the recommendation that's made to council. And future conversations, could include exploration of grant opportunities and other types of opportunities that might be available for the Young Child and Family Center project that the city could come in and apply for. For example, one of the things that could potentially be pursued is working with JDLM on a Defense Communities Infrastructure Program, or the DCIP, that we've discussed before. And there could be, another program that could be used in conjunction with that to leverage and see what resources we might be able to pull in for this type of project. Yeah.
So hopefully that helps.
Jen, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
They mentioned classrooms. Is that going to be an expansion of early intervention preschool services for North Thurston Public Schools? Is it going to be in lieu of their sort of satellite preschools as they exist now on current campuses? Or is it some mystery third option? The need and interest is off the charts, but I'm just curious if they've been specific in naming what populations will be served by those classrooms? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah,
Well,
no,
'cause we're underserving. We have 600 approximately people that we're not serving today.
In
In
the
early-
EI preschool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And how do they screen who gets to be on?
It depends on, there's a large criteria that makes a child eligible for early intervention services. And then from that, those early intervention services, which are birth to 3 funded federally, then those children, depending on criteria, end up coming into the school's early intervention preschool programs. But all of the programs in North Thurston also have typically developing peers as peer models in those classrooms as well. So the numbers sort of get.
So you have to be a student that needs special care.
If you are a child in the school district, by law, the district has to provide those early intervention services based on a large list of criteria for that. And then in Thurston County, Olympia School District is the only school that provides those services directly to the birth to 3 subset. Otherwise, South Parent provides those birth to 3 early intervention services. And then those students end up in early intervention preschools, depending on where they're at diagnostically and if their IFSP transfers into an IEP.
thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I appreciate that, yeah.
That's a lot of
But
action.
it family support plan, the IFSP is the document that governs early intervention, birth to 3.
So this is an
services.
open access to anyone any kids that can go, I mean, not.
I mean, that was my
all-
question, is it like open access
Can you have
preschool to
homeschool?
whomever?
Homeschooling parents,
Ignite Family Academy for homeschool.
Mhm.
So we have an alternative learning
okay.
experience for students who want homeschools. That's Ignite Family Academy.
Oh, okay, so that's a different, we have that already taken care of. So this is serving a specific population that
But we're
we
not
are not serving right
Yeah,
now.
we don't have space.
Okay, so
The
we're,
state was funding and then just pulled back on funding.
Can you give examples of what is the criteria or who's being underfunded,
Like to get it early intervention services?
Yeah.
Developmental disabilities, medical conditions. I mean, there's a million. If you have a congenital heart defect, you automatically qualify for early intervention services. If a pediatrician, there's screenings and there's statistically significant delay in developmental mild areas, that can be an automatic qualifier for EI services. So it's pretty robust.
Yeah, and if there's, I mean, if we need follow-up information, we can.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't want to derail everything. I
No,
was
it's okay.
curious what the classrooms were specifically for.
Yeah, and did that get your question answered?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so then continuing on a couple of the other top themes, so to the left there, you see trails, access to open space and preservation of natural areas. So we know that people want access to open space, but also preserving those natural areas at the same time. Multi-use trails is the best way to make those things happen because you can go through a natural area, but make sure that you're in the trail in the correct place and not trampling and saving those wildlife corridors. And then we know that trails are great for health and wellness. So it's a very desired amenity in parks is having a lot of trails accessible. And then over to the right is sports fields. Oh, I'm sorry. Goodness gracious. Thought I went back and did that.
You just wanna make it.
Yeah. So we'll go from current slide. You see it? Okay, thank you, Carter. With regard to sports fields, so we haven't really discussed too much with this work group, except for on the tour, and then recognizing that there were 2 different bands and that there were lots of conversations happening on the tour. So what we learned through the comprehensive plan process, and it's really common sense, there's 2 different types of schools of thought for sports fields. So the sports fields are desired obviously more for those user groups who book the fields than the general public. Although you know, the general public typically recognizes that there are health and wellness benefits with having sports fields. But through the, you know, discussions with Parks Board and the city council and through the comprehensive plan process, we acknowledge that those two groups are very different and they have different needs. So while there is general interest from the public for sports fields, there is more specific interest from user groups that are being turned away because we don't have enough space. And that interest, as we kind of got to the final stages before the comp plan was approved and really talking to sports user groups specifically, recognizing that the comp plan also says we're not in an acquisition phase, and so there is not interest to go find new property for sports fields. There's definitely interest in finishing the sports fields that the city currently has space planned for sports fields. And so for an example, those unfinished fields at Meridian Park, we've got families, you know, from Northeast Lacey that are having to drive across town because those fields are not finished. And so, so that's more information about the sports fields from our public input. And then the connection there to the PCIP in regards to trails and open space is the Great Keogh Park next phase. Although the first phase is going to construction here in 2025, and there will certainly be trails to access the open space there. And we're very, very excited about that project. And there are no utilities and no restrooms in the first phase. And so that's something that this next phase could come in and do. And obviously that just provides better access, more trail opportunities, more support for maintenance and operations. And so that's the concept there. Yeah, of course.
Field.
Yep.
Do you have any idea how much is rented out for recreational play versus competitive play?
We have it broken out. Couldn't give you a quick answer. We do have, you know, we have a recreation registration software where we book all of our stuff. And so, you know, we can like run reports. But I will tell you, so like with the rack, for example, the more competitive play happens more on the weekends. And so like the regional athletic complex is both a public, kind of a community facing and a destination facing facility, if you will. So the community is able to really use it a lot more during the week. And then we balance the weekends with community and like people coming from out of town. So, I mean, the rack is definitely an economic driver in that, you know, bringing in people who are gonna stay in hotels and bring money into the community, and, you know, visit those local businesses who are also part of our community. But then being able to, you know, it's just really a balance there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Another one on here, Long Lake Park. We haven't talked too much about that. We didn't stop on the tour there. So the city was able to purchase the adjacent waterfront property, but there's currently no access there because it's kind of an addition, and it's been a, you know, 40-year vision of the city to have that be part of the park. And so, so that would provide, you know, access to space while preserving natural areas. Meridian Campus North Park it's down here. It's having trouble moving this guy. Let's see, try again. You can see it. Oh, there we go. I kept trying to do that during the video and it kept stopping the video. Replacement of the, let's see, Meridian North Campus is here, and that's that 5-acre park. We also did not go by that one in the tour. But it's currently not accessible. It's just all natural. And then also, as you know, improving the Wonderwood Park trails. You saw some of the challenges there. That would provide safer, more accessible, you know, walking opportunities. And then in regards to sports fields, we already talked about this one. That's finishing those or developing the sports fields that are already slated. We did go stop by there on the tour. And then of course the turf replacements at the rack are related to making sure that there's sports access in the spaces that we already currently have planned. The other information from the comprehensive plan is the favored amenities. And so these are the ones that have come up that were themes in the comp plan. I'm gonna start with the ones that are not on the PCIP and I'll tell you why. So disc golf there in the upper left. There's a current course at Woodland Creek Park. There's an 18-hole course going in at Great Cuyo Park with that first phase 1A. Food Forest over there on the right, staff and Parks Board has been working on this one for several years, getting policy and draft agreements ready. What we now need is a nonprofit organization to come in and install and operate, and staff capacity to work on this project. But the Parks Board has identified a few places in Lacey that a 1-acre food forest could go in. Again, needing that right partner to work with, and that's at Woodland Creek Park and Great Cuyo Park. So the ones that are on the PCIP, of course, you'll recognize a pickleball. You'll see there in the middle, we have that Rainier Vista Park addition of 4 additional courts. The skate park track concept, you know, from the Meridian Park project. That's kind of a picture of what that looks like there in the left. And then playgrounds, we know, of course, there are many of those and many in need of replacement, but those are the top, favored amenities for outdoor. I'll point out quickly the connection to the PCIP. So we already talked about the pickleball court. There also is a potential pickleball court at Meridian Park as well, along with skate features and or pump track. And then Rainier Vista Park, you're familiar with that project. I think we've talked about it quite a bit with the addition of those pickleball courts there. And then just quickly, because we're going to be diving into parks funding more tonight, we know that the different options are program vendor and rental fees, sponsorships, grants and donations, general fund, lodging tax, committed and assigned reserves, excess property tax or general obligation bonds, public facilities district. Metropolitan Park District.
Can you lower that? So we can see.
Yes.
Okay, so it's 460, thank you.
Yeah, and we're actually gonna be talking about that more, so I'm not spending time on it. Impact fees, I'm gonna be sharing some information in our next slides, and then same with the cultural access program, owing you some information there. And then becoming more and more familiar with the PCIP, but just kind of wanted to see if there's any questions on the new capital projects at this point that are on the list. And then again, with the replacement projects, any questions have come up?
Could you go back one slide, please?
Yes.
48. Thank you.
You're welcome. Tonight, we're gonna take a deeper look into funding options and how they relate to projects on the PCIP. We'll go through a full group activity. And we'll talk about how sustainable those funding options are for the long term, for like the M&O that we talked about, maintenance and operations, sorry.
Question?
And yeah, just any other questions before we proceed? Yeah, go ahead.
Mark.
So, I hope this will make sense. I'm trying to understand what the bottom line is in terms of what our needs are. And then take from that, subtract from that, what would be a traditional funding in the absence of any new funding initiatives, to see what that delta is in terms of the gap that we need to fill to realize the vision that's laid out in the PCIP. And I'm a little confused because I had sent Jenny an email a few weeks ago with a CC to Jen and to Jamie and to Troy, because the number that you gave us, that Jamie gave us for your replacement needs was 6.5 million and new projects was 63. Well, that doesn't add up to 81.66. And so I want to make sure, because I think that's a really important number for us. Is 8166 the 6-year vision, if you will, costed out?
Oh, I see. You mean like with the escalations that she mentioned previously?
No, not adjusted for inflation, but, what I'm trying to get is, what have you got up there now?
Oh, I see. Okay, so let me share my screen here.
So.
Share the right one. That here. I think what you're pointing out.
I think it was in your very first slide.
Yeah, yep, I see what you're saying.
Really
Yeah.
close to the front, you had,
Sorry, make you guys busy here.
I think when we,
okay,
It's this
stop
one.
right there.
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
so new capital 65, that, okay, and then replacement. Oh, you added in operating. That's the differential, okay. So
Mhm,
for us, we are looking at operating, but largely at capital. So for us, there's a $71 million vision, costing out that vision. And that is a 6-year number, correct?
So, one of the things, it's a great question. One of the things that we need to do through this process is, and we were gonna bring this up during the activity, but this is a great time to do it, is that the PCIP needs to be right-sized as well. So this is basically with our comprehensive plan, you know, we put in, after assessing the needs, it's way too much for 6 years, basically, to put it in a nutshell. So there's gonna be some things that are gonna need to be kicked out a little bit farther. So in the comp plan right now, there's that 6-year plan. And then there is the longer term items that we have identified. And so it is a very hefty PCIP. It's the first time we've had an official PCIP. And so,
Because what I'm trying to get at is sort of a bottom line. If we have 65 million in new projects and 6.5 million in replacement needs, the question is then, what would we expect to get under current funding, a policy and history, so we can identify what the gap is? Because I don't think we can do our job if we don't know what that gap is. Then the other thing that I would mention is, and I think everybody's aware of this, although we haven't talked about it much, we don't have a figure for deferred maintenance. And that was actually the subject of my email, and Jamie reported back to me that the city has hired a consultant, and the consultant will be doing that analysis and coming back with a number, but that's certainly going to be a multi-million-dollar number. And not hundreds of thousands, but millions of dollars in deferred maintenance. And so at some point before we move to that agenda item of looking at initial funding priorities, I just want to make sure I understand what the need is and the gap is between that need and what we would get if we didn't exist and the city just continued to fund us the way they always have. Does that make sense?
yeah, I think it's a great question. What would we get if there was no new funding identified? That's your question.
Yeah,
That's your first question.
what towards that 81 million, not 81, yeah. Sorry, it's hard to explain, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
what's the gap? And understand that we need to put a placeholder in there for deferred maintenance, because we don't know. I mean, if our goal is to try to fund this vision, we're gonna have to put a placeholder in there for deferred maintenance, because that's a multi-million-dollar challenge that we face that has to be addressed.
And I will say with the deferred maintenance, there are some items on the PCIP that could be considered deferred maintenance. And yes, we are having that work done to make that assessment. And the fact still remains that that additional parks funding is needed, sustainable long-term funding, and that kind of reinforces the point there. And so to answer your first question though, of like, with funding as it is exactly right now, I'm looking to our finance director to maybe help me. We
Yeah, I think maybe the.
compete with a lot of different things to get funding for parks.
I don't know, we could put a number on that, Mark, but the way we've been operating is we've been addressing and prioritizing capital projects and we've been using reserves to build those. So it's certainly not something that is sustainable in our budget. We look for year-end savings, but that gets prioritized with every other need the city has. So I think maybe the best way for this group to look at this is there's not any funding at all for this capital improvement program. Because it is really just a opportunity that the city uses, you know, that approach in terms of its budgeting.
So there is no dedicated funding.
Correct.
So I promise I won't say anything more, but let's close with this. At some point, we're gonna hopefully take a package forward to the council, theoretically could advance to a package forward to the population, the public in Lacey. And I think we need to be able to say to them that in order to make significant progress on critical capital replacement and capital improvements, you know, we have a gap that needs to be filled. And I think we need to have some sense of the magnitude of that before then we'll be able to come up with our ideas in terms of how you fill that gap. And so maybe you can just process that a little bit as we move forward and work on what alternatives we have to advance. And I won't say anything anymore the rest of the night. I apologize.
No, don't apologize. I think this is a great discussion and, yeah,
I think it also shapes a framework if we're gonna ask the public for money.
Yeah, exactly.
What are we asking for specifically? And that is what we're talking, the gap.
Yeah.
How do you frame that so people understand what
Yeah.
it's not just now, but it's what we're gonna look
Right.
for in the future, so.
yeah, this is, this is the current gap and then there's more, there's also more. So-
What is it? What is it? Fund the gap. We're gonna do that, fund the gap.
Trademark this.
Do we do Delta Gap or just Gap, Mark?
Yeah.
Just Gap, okay.
If there's no other questions, that's all I had on that item.
Okay, all right. Thanks so much, Jen. We appreciate it. And now we're gonna do the parks funding options with Jen again and Troy. Which is gonna lead, I think, into what Mark was gonna do.
Yeah, I'm gonna kick this off and then hand it over to Troy here. You see that one? Great. All right, yeah, so essentially, we wanted to just present some additional data and clarify some of the funding information. And like I said before, I'll use some info on impact fees and cultural access program after looking into it a little bit more. So first of all, with the grants and donations, we just wanted to make sure, just explain a little bit more about how it works. And just how, you know, grateful we are for these revenue streams, and this is something that staff is committed to applying for grants as we can and have capacity for moving forward, of course, like we always do, and always, you know, looking for those donations and graciously accepting those donations. But just that it is an unpredictable and unsustainable funding mechanism, just because they require matching funds. They typically don't cover maintenance operations, and it is, you know, that staff capacity that I just mentioned. We were successful in getting $500,000 for that first phase of Great Cuyo Park, so we're very grateful for that. But just to kind of explain where we're at with the next grant cycle, so the Recreation and Conservation Office it's a 2-year cycle for applying for grants, and this is a very viable source of funding for parks, obviously. But we did apply in 2024 for $500,000 for those Rainier Vista pickleball improvements. That includes netting and 2 outdoor ping pong tables. That one is on the PCIP because we don't currently have funding identified in our budget. So if we don't get the grant, the likelihood that we can do this project goes way down. So that's why it's on the PCIP. We also applied for $220,000 for playground replacement at Bush Park. This one is not on the PCIP because we do have funding identified in the budget. And what would happen is if we do get that $220,000, that would reimburse the city, and that just helps us extend the dollars that we have to work with for a different project and it helps us be, better stewards of the public funds. So just want to make sure everyone understands how they work. After the application process, staff compiles a presentation to a panel which gets scored and ranked against other statewide applicants. We ranked number 17 for Rainier Vista and 26 for Bush Park out of 64 projects. So if the RCO is funded at the recommended level of $150 million in the upcoming capital budget, both of our projects would get funded. But we won't know until July if the legislature passes the budget and at what level. So if they do reduce the total amount, any projects that are lower down just get not funded. That's how that works. So these grants are extremely competitive. We have been both successful and unsuccessful in the past, but we will keep trying. And then the other thing I definitely want to touch on as we move forward with recommendations is something that Mark actually brought up at a previous meeting, and that's that example of the senior center expansion project. So we agree that when the time is right, that should be proposed for the city's legislative agenda. And in addition, that's a project that could be eligible through the Department of Commerce for CDBG grant funds. And that's how the last phase of the senior center was partially funded as well. So it really is putting together those pieces that we want to make sure that if this group has an idea and a recommendation maybe outside that funding package that you come up with, we have this other recommendations coming out of this group that, for example, staff should continue to pursue these grants and donations as those options become available. So kind of keep that in mind as we move through and talk about funding options. In regards to the impact fees, we did, and this could be an example of another recommendation that comes out of this group, is go ahead and maybe recommend doing a study for impact fees, but those do, what I've learned in talking to the CED director and doing a little more research, this isn't something that we readily have available. There would have to be a study done, and it's not a sustainable and predictable funding option. A consultant would need to be hired, like I said. It can't be used for M&O, maintenance and operations. Complementary funding source is needed. And then there's the tracking that takes place. And the fees must be proportional to the impact that a new development would have on the infrastructure. So there's a lot of different rules. It's also used by neighboring municipalities, and it could be something that, could be recommended for future.
Jan,
Yeah.
on that, the thing that confused me, because we kind of said that City of Lacey was mostly already built out.
Mm-hmm.
But yet in Lacey Life, they're surveying the Lacey residents on what kind of housing you want to go in. Single family, multifamily, or whatever. So I guess I don't have a real good handle on mostly built out. What is left? What are we really talking about?
I received by email an invitation from the city to comment on the overall comprehensive plan. And what I was reminded is that one of the questions was, we need to build 8,000 units or houses. Where would we put 8,000? So that kind of gave me an idea of the future development and impact fees, but again, it's not sustainable or what's the other word?
It's kind of predictable. Yeah.
Well, predictable in the sense we need 8,000 units, but sustainable after that, no.
So I do know that the city is pursuing, affordable housing options for people. I'm not a subject matter expert on the community economic development initiatives, but I think the message here is that yes, I mean, there's some build out that's available, and so there could be some impact fees, but to get that, to realize that funding, the consultant would need to be hired, there would need to be a study done. The city would need to implement, a tracking for it, and there's various different rules and regulations around that.
Is there some sort of just not quotable kind of thing, but assessment of how much money would, what realm of money are we talking? Because this wasn't something you guys had built out, like as far as how much would be available in impact fees, right? we don't have like, talking 1 million, 5 million, 200,000, like,
Oh,
where
yeah.
are we, like, what is the opportunity here, I suppose?
Well, it's kind of hard to answer that question, but typically how impact fees are developed. We have to identify projects that are solely due to growth, so growth pays for growth is the basic premise behind an impact fee, so we'd have to take the ECIP and really analyze what is truly from growth. Then you take the expected growth over time and you divide those, and that's how you end up with that impact fee, so it's you can't really answer that because we don't have that calculation. And a lot of it is dependent on how fast growth actually does occur within the city, but it is limited by law in terms of how that calculation is completed. But it's based on the projects identified versus overall growth, so it's a limited number.
But for clarity, it isn't necessarily a single family home build, an apartment complex could be assessed impact fees or something like that. Any new or renovating an office building into apartments, that could be subject to impact fees. All of those could.
I'm not real familiar with the parks impact fees as well, but I'm gonna guess it's limited to residential. So it could include multifamily, but you think about the use and who's going to use those parks. It's the people that live here in Lacey. So, but I'm not actually certain on that though. But multifamily for sure.
And again, I mean, great questions. And again, if it's a recommendation, kind of that one of those other recommendations from this group to have the city, hire a consultant and pursue that. That could be a recommendation that comes out of this group. We did not include it on the list of options for funding because it's not something that's currently available.
I just didn't have a good handle on how much was available to be developed in the future and according to the zoning, what it would allow. I don't have a good concept of what we have. I felt it was kind of dismissed because there wasn't a lot left to develop. Maybe I misunderstood that.
No, I would say that is true. There isn't, in comparison to the past, there's not as much in Lacey to develop. So, but yeah, I mean, happy to get our CED director here if there's additional questions that. Sorry, what's the clarity that you all would need?
Very difficult,
Yeah.
Right.
very difficult politics on that issue.
But what threw me off was the Lacey Life asking, the citizens of this area, what kind of housing do you want? And I thought, well, if we didn't have a lot available, why are we asking that? No, I mean, couldn't put it together.
But I think Thurston County, don't they have a whole planning? I know it's going for Yelm and Bucota, and I mean, there's a huge scale, because housing has to get here, and it's in multiple, everyone in the county has to share where we're gonna put housing and how much housing is gonna go with having resources available to it. You can't just put housing and there's no resource for it. So there's discussions at the Thurston County level for Yelm, Bucota, here, Rainier, and Water, Lacey, Olympia. So it's all a partnership share on where the housing is gonna go. So it may just be part of the survey, not just directly at Lacey, but housing overall. I mean,
I took it as,
It was Lacey.
it's Lacey specific, but I think there's going to be conversations on how strategically
That will be
do we
one piece.
share. Yeah, how do we share that workload with each other?
Maybe that's something we could.
Yep.
I'm sorry, you said the C.
We can get our community and economic development director here, if there are additional questions, but again, it's, just trying to keep it relevant to this group.
right.
But appreciate the discussion. Regarding the cultural access program, so did look into this, got a legal opinion on it. So this is a voter required local sales tax to benefit nonprofit cultural organizations. So the city automatically doesn't fit into that. And then just information, so it's not on the list of viable options. But the primary purpose, just for educational purposes, the primary purpose of the nonprofit must be advancement and preservation of science or technology, the visual or performing arts, zoology, botany, anthropology, heritage, or natural history, And any organization must directly provide programming or experiences available to the general public. So those are the basic requirements. There's a lot more to it, but kind of tried to capture the main information on one slide. So again, not applicable for the Parks Capital Improvement Program. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Troy.
The committed assigned our reserves. This probably gets to Mark's question maybe the best. So what we do with our reserves every year, we do an analysis, and the city council basically communicates its priorities through this process. So it designates reserves for certain purposes. So this is an official action that occurs each year. So we definitely have a list of reserves that are dedicated to parks. And I'll get to that slide. So these are the 2024 adopted reserves. We will be going through a process here in about a month with our council again to look at our reserves and determine their priorities. But this is a list of about $4 million that are dedicated to various parks priorities. So in terms of the funding, you could certainly say these are dedicated funding. The one thing I'd point out from this list is the rack synthetic field replacement of almost 2.2 million. Something worth noting there is not all of these funds can be easily repurposed. Every other reserve the council can choose to repurpose to any other general government purpose, but within the $2.2 million, about 1.5 million is what I would call restricted reserves. So we have a portion, we have 500,000 coming from the lodging tax source. So those are funds that must go towards promotion of tourism or the operation of a tourism facility. For us here in Lacey, that is the RAC. That is our big tourist facility. It's probably the biggest and largest in all of Thurston County, as a matter of fact. The rest of the monies come from Public Facility District. So that's a separate taxing district. That is for the sole purpose of the RAC. So obviously there's a connection between field replacement and the source of those funds. But the remaining 2.5 or so is certainly can be repurposed as the council sees fit. Obviously, they would take recommendations from this committee if this committee wanted to change direction, or depending on how these priorities end up in terms of your recommendation. But again, I just wanted to highlight what was restricted in terms of these funds.
That Pacific property, is that the train depot?
Yes.
Yeah, so that would be a museum project. Yeah.
What is that one?
5,700 property, the
Train depot,
Okay.
So you can see there's a pretty good mix in terms of repair replacement projects, as well as new projects like the museum property, various trails, that type of thing. So we can certainly get a lot more specific in what we're recommending and what we're designating each year. So any question on our reserves or the purpose of that or how that operates?
Sorry, just a clarity. So is this a couple things? Historically, is there any value in us understanding the history of how reserves have been assigned to parks projects? Or is it just any year could be completely different than any trending of history?
Yeah, it's probably more the, we take a look at what the current priorities are of council. There are new priorities that come to light each year. Public safety has been our priority here the last 2 years. You can see the construction as you come to City Hall. So it really just depends on the council's vision, some of the various needs. Like I said, the public safety has certainly taken the front seat here recently, but the council's had strong support for parks, which is why you see $4 million here towards parks. But yeah, it's really kind of just evolved. So I don't know if looking historically is real helpful, but this has been a pretty consistent level of reserves from the council in terms of their support for parks. We have spent decent amounts. The first phase 1A of Cuyo Park, that is coming from reserve. That's about $5.4 million in reserves for parks. So You know, that was seen as a top priority by the council in terms of park investments. It really just depends on what the competing interests are, I would say.
So just a further, building on Mark's point earlier, it would probably benefit us to say, if nothing else, if we don't take anything to the public and such like that, for 2025, if reserves are available, here's our 1 through 10 for parks, correct? So we could have multi-pronged recommendations and have, here's our reserve recommendation, here's maybe our wish list recommendation and our recommendation for repeating the same word, but on how to get to that.
Could be, yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of flexibility in what this work group brings forward.
And all of these projects on this display are embedded somewhere in the numbers that you've given us previously.
They're not on the PCIP, if that's.
No, they're not assigned to specific projects within that. We did bring this forward at a previous meeting in terms of what funding was available, but
There is a slide that incorporates that $4 million on, as one of the line items on it that we've seen. But it's not a part of that bigger number that you were asking about earlier. So this number is mentioned on multiple slides that we've seen that says like committed funds, $4 million, but it's not a part of that bigger number.
But the rack synthetic field replacement was on. But some of these, I guess I'm confused. Well, I'll follow up later.
you're looking for like an assignment to specific projects. Guess maybe we could talk offline. I
Yeah,
guess.
the rack field replacement is listed in the park capital improvement, that 6-year plan, because we know that's a need that's gonna be coming up within the next 6 years. And it does happen to have funding assigned to it, so that's a good flag. The rest of them. Well, the museum, there's 2 line items there related to the museum, the 5,700 Pacific property. So that 545,635 is currently held in reserves for the Lacey Museum and Cultural Center.
And the funding for the field replacement, that goes beyond the 6-year period of the PCIP. Now that's funding that we identified long ago for the replacement of every field at the rack, and that's probably more of an 8 to 10 year life cycle versus the 6-year window.
So does that mean then that?
Sorry. So I think maybe we can come back, like, let's do the activity
Okay.
for tonight, and that's gonna give you an example of how you're gonna compare like a project that needs funding to funding options. And then we can definitely circle back.
So it's sort of just walks onto the radar.
My final comments and update for the work group has to do with the Metropolitan Park District. Previous slides, you saw, the flexibility, sustainability nature of these funds, but I want to give you a little more detail on actually how the Metropolitan Park District works. This is a separate taxing district. This is basically a separate entity. It has all the same powers that we do as a municipality in terms of running a park. This district can acquire property, it could issue debt, hire employees, set policy and rules for facilities. They're really put in place to, for a park's function, obviously, but its sole purpose is to operate, to acquire, to improve, maintain parks facilities. This is a sustainable source of funding for the district and parks purposes. It follows the same property tax rules as local government, so it is limited to 1% growth each year. In general, the city council acts as the board in an ex officio capacity, but it can delegate that authority to a separate board. By RCW, the county treasurer in which the Metro Park District is located in serves as the treasurer. I don't think that's typical. I think typically the treasurer delegates that to someone else. In fact, I previously was a designated treasurer for a Metropolitan Park District. And, you know, we talked about this a little bit in our funding discussion, but there are the possibility that this funding could be decreased depending on what happens with assessed valuation, what happens with other taxing jurisdictions. So this is considered a junior taxing district, which means if we start to hit those statutory limits, this is one of the first districts that is forced to lower its levy. So we definitely need to kind of keep that in mind. It's, we have a long ways to go in terms of hitting those statutory limits, but it's, you know, certainly something to be aware of, but it's, you know, in general, a very sustainable source of funding for parks and parks facilities.
And excuse me, Troy, if I remember correctly, Olympia and Tumwater already have this in place. We are, as a large city, the ones that do not. Okay.
That's correct. Any questions on Metropolitan Park District?
A no cigar.
We tried, yeah.
We have tried.
When?
Yeah,
Yes,
we
we
have.
did.
And it's, what year was that?
2018.
2018. And the problem, from my perspective, because I was one of the co-chairs, along with Jeff Gadman, was we didn't have enough time to run a campaign and educate our community, the Lacey community, on the need and what it would do. So council had said they wanted to run it, and so we ran it. But we lost by, was it 800 votes?
It was 47% yes, and you need 51. So
You need 50, yeah,
50, yeah, it's simple majority.
right.
Yeah, so it was really close. And Tumwater's passed and it was the same margin, but it was the opposite. So, yeah.
So
Anyway.
So
how
it's,
does that benefit? You know, doesn't that take away from our park system, the regular City of Lacey park system, having metropolitan? I mean, it's more taxes for us. I guess I don't understand.
It is a property tax. It's a special funding district. And so it would be, so the way that Tumwater and Olympia both do it is that their city council acts as the board. Like Troy said, the county delegated that oversight. And so there is an annual meeting of that district and just to discuss what the rates are and what the funding will go for that. You know, it has its own like separate budget. So we have is it similar to the transportation benefit district?
Somewhat. So there's a lot of ways to structure these districts. There's cases where cities will transfer assets into the district, basically gift those assets to the district so that district owns and operates. There's also models where there's interlocal agreements, so it's more like a service that occurs. So the city would retain ownership of the parks but charge for that service. So there's a lot of different ways you could structure this, but and I don't know which is most common. Haven't been involved with the Metropolitan Park District in a number of years, but I've seen both of those models. So it doesn't really take away, it enhances this. Maybe a different way of looking at that. It would basically kind of shift those duties and shift the burden to that district.
Did you previously say 6.6 million is the potential on that, correct?
That's at 50 cents per thousand. So that's something that if this group wants to look at the Metropolitan Park District, one of the questions would be at what level funding, you know, what impact it might have on a property owner, but the scenarios I showed were 25 cents per thousand, 50 cents and 75, and 50 cents was 6.6 million. The statutory limit is 75 cents.
And I think, Sherry, that correct me if I'm wrong, but I view the Metropolitan Park District as primarily a dedicated a new dedicated revenue source. And it is a new unit of government, but it is under the control of the city council. And frankly, I think it's about the only real viable option in terms of significant amounts of money. And it's been in play in this state now for decades. Very little risk you just got to get the voters to agree to pay a little bit more on property taxes for Parks and Rec. And I don't know that there's any downside. It's, you know, you've had some problems with Public Facilities District cooking the books and that hasn't happened in a while, but I've never heard of anything on the downside in terms of metropolitan park districts, in terms of any major issues or problems. Have you?
I'm not, I think that, you know, the critical piece there is the local government is generally still very involved in terms of the governance of that district, so. It's in a sense, even though it's separate, it's kind of an extension of local government, so. Local governments have been operating parks and recreation facilities for a long time, so it's kind of just a natural extension.
Sherry, I think what I was picking up on though, that you were bringing up is the raising of our already high property taxes as a new homeowner in Lacey. Is that we're going at it?
Just to pay my taxes.
Yeah, I just got anything, my stuff went up too.
That is what it is.
But if you take a look at maybe if we could do something, if that's a route we explore, I would love to chat with Ruth offline. Maybe, you know, it would be helpful, like for me, I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean to my house? That is, you know, if we look at what's the average home value in the city of Lacey, what's my annual cost gonna be? And I think that's.
Slide that was shared, right? That you had those numbers on a slide a couple meetings ago, that what the impact would be.
It was like minimal, right, if I recall.
$45 is.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking 43, something minimal, but for the public, you know, cause like if someone's like, oh, and I'm like, okay, $45, that's, you know.
That's all part of the marketing when you get into the.
Well, it's like what Mark said there too, right? It's one of the only, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
It's one of like the only viable funding sources, and it's reliable and stable, which used to be our biggest problem now, is that everybody wants an indoor pool and an indoor playground, but nobody wants to pay for it.
So I think we're
We
gonna
can't
do the
have both.
activity, sorry, I know we wanna not get out.
So that would take away from funding from the city parks. It helps fund it. Is that what you're saying?
I think all those become a part of that now, but they're not city parks anymore, they're now the metropolitan district's problem, if that
Oh,
makes
I
sense.
see.
Yeah, all that's now its own separate thing, under the control of the city. So sort of like a parks department, we have a metropolitan parks district, if that makes sense.
But Sherry makes a very good point, and I think in terms of our recommendations to council, the word supplanting comes into play, where it doesn't really end up adding full value because you're just, you know, let's say you get $6 million a year in new revenue. Currently, let's say that the city is putting in, well, we see 4 million and the operating 1.9, you've got grants. Bottom line is they may say, well, we don't have to do all that anymore, you know, and so I hope that we will make it clear to the council that if they do this, we're not looking to supplant. The city needs to continue to do what it's been doing, but this is new money, so we can do more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we're getting right down to the point.
Okay, so our next activity is we are going to look at some funding priorities. And as you can see, these are the revenue options that we've talked quite a bit about and some projects. So the projects that we have listed here is based on, there's 10 projects, and it's based on the activity that you guys did last time. So what we did was we took a sum total of how you guys prioritize them and rank them. So this is sum of all of your totals. Now, it's not perfect because, as you know, some of the groups took a radically different approach.
Yes, they did. They did.
What do you guys do?
Right. So, which we appreciate, so we recognize that it's not a perfect list, but really what the purpose of this is to just get through some activities of going through the motion of prioritizing funding. So really, this could be applied to many of the projects that we have on the list. And as it turns out, this list of 10 projects is actually pretty well representative of a lot of the projects. They have M&O, some of them are new, some of them are replacements. One of them is a very big project. So we think it actually represents quite a bit. So as a group, we'd like you to go through. I will be checking the boxes with an X for ones that are, as you guys tell me, we'd like you to select the ones that are viable, long-term, sustainable funding options. And when we're done with that, the ones that are identified by you, we will do a deeper dive into some of them, and get some more details related to them. So
Can you
just
zoom in just a little bit, so it's a little easier at the bottom on the right there, where it just says the percentage, if you. As a collective group, you're gonna have to go through which funding group.
And he's talking about the one in the middle, everything together, so I understand it. There's only one.
I'm sorry.
But the fire district is where the city.
I don't know how to get rid of it either.
I
know that they chose to, because like Tacoma Metro Parks District goes out to this.
Oh, that one.
It's Pierce County. They did Pierce County. Like.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the Zoom thing.
Lazy Fire. Olympia have their. That's why Olympia has such a discrepancy. in-
No, I know, I'm talking about the
Also, our fire district extends beyond those limits as well.
Okay.
The
Parts of
Parks District
unincorporated.
do-
So first, we'll start with the Wonderwood Park Trails resurfacing. As you guys remember, that was a top priority for quite a few of you. And we'll go through sponsorship, donations, vendor fees, rentals, grants, committed and assigned reserves, lodging tax, excess levy, veto bonds, Metro Parks District, and Public Facilities District. And I will just go over it really quickly. So committed and assigned reserves, just a reminder, there's about $4 million identified towards future park projects. So as Troy just presented, about 2 million has to be used at the rack. So there is some flexibility on some other of those. Lodging tax can only be used for tourism, marketing, and special events, or operation of facilities that attract tourists. Excess property levy and geo bonds are long-term debt used to raise money for capital projects. Voter approval is required, can't be used for M&O. An MPD is a junior property taxing district, can be used for capital, M&O, and to issue debt. Voter approval is required, but there's no sunset, it's ongoing. And for a PFD, we would need a regional project, a partnering agency, and voter approval. Just a quick summary on those. So for Wonderwood Park Trails and Resurfacing, free to throw out which ones you guys think would be.
Restate the mission of what
Yeah.
we're supposed to,
Yep,
so
so
it's the top part, say that we're asking us to do.
geez, awesome. So select long-term, viable, stable funding options for each project.
Are you wanting us to raise our hands and vote as you go? I'm not sure, or is this a mentee thing or?
It's just, I guess, as a group, tell me which ones you think would be an option for
Committed and
Wonderwood.
assigned reserves.
I'm sorry?
Committed and
Yeah, I
and
would agree with
assigned
that as well.
reserves.
for that one.
Yeah.
I mean, Metro Parks
Yeah,
funding one.
yeah, MPD.
Was it public?
I don't know if we really discussed that one at length.
Replacement of the Rainier Vista Park. Can we enlarge it just Smith? Sorry, I can barely.
Sorry, I'm sitting close, so I can see it really
I have
well.
20/20 vision, so I can. barely
Okay,
see, so.
thank you, thank you.
It's not
Chad?
good.
That's a very long way. You guys are not.
We do have a couple printed ones.
Yeah.
If
Oh, there we go.
anybody wants.
Okay.
Pass that down. I got another one too.
So Rainier Vista Park and playground replacement.
We talk about sponsors and donations, especially go to our corporate sponsors.
But that one was but when we were talking about was Huntermer, wasn't it? The business one?
It was a number of them that we
Yeah.
talked about that
Sure, we'll be good. Here in the best.
I'll share with Mark.
felt would.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, Huntermer is in the
Midtown area, so Hunter, I think would be
Looking
sponsored.
more Hunter for sponsorship.
Kind of sharing.
That's right. I can see over
Random,
now.
is that
Right. So.
Okay.
Put my glasses on.
Vista.
Is that one?
And MPD.
Yeah.
Radiant Park,
Because it's new. I would put
These
that
are
in
like
grants,
potential.
as well as Metro Park District, in my opinion.
Chris, feel free to speak up down there.
Can we do sponsorship for the pickleball one too, for the Meridian Park? Sponsors and donations, because that's gonna be next to North Thurston Public Schools, right? So we could talk to somebody for that.
Or corporate sponsorships for, I mean, if there's a branding or logo opportunity, since it's out there next to all of the facilities, all the compounds. Compound district.
I see that sponsorships and.
You know, it's gonna be a
donations are
lot.
Virtual.
That's $5 million.
It's gonna be probably a number of sources, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I would think grants.
Keep in mind, just a reminder, we're looking for the more sustainable funding
Sustainable,
options
okay.
for this assignment. So
So
I wonder why.
So
we
then
included,
take all
like,
of the
sponsors
sponsored and
and-
donation things off of
Yeah.
here.
Just to make sure everybody,
Okay.
just to make sure you understand what all the options are and what the limitations are.
I'd say for.
The sponsorships off of Virgin Parks and,
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't think you're gonna.
Never gonna be reliable.
Not particularly.
And then like we said before, those other recommendations, would definitely consider, so.
But the program vendor rental fees for the
Oh, yeah.
senior
Mhm.
center.
it's not.
If it doesn't exist yet, though, that's future funding. That's not gonna help you get the thing built.
Yeah.
You can't
Yeah,
vend or
build,
rent
yeah.
a thing that doesn't exist.
Any reason
Take those off.
not to use public facilities district?
Not.
For phase three, they're
Like
gonna want,
senior center.
they're gonna want you to write a grant specifically for phase.
That's another whole,
So the PFD requires a regional partner.
right.
So the PFD funds are currently, I mean, they're all obligated to
So
current
that's a good point.
facilities.
Yeah, this would be, this is just talking PFDs in general. So there is an opportunity for a second PFD potentially. If you're currently in one, there's a new-ish legislation that you can enter into another. You'd have to have another, it has to be at least 2 agencies from the current interlocal for the PFD. So,
And so you have to come to
It
an
would be-
agreement. with
yeah.
the agencies.
yep,
You
with
need a
another
partner.
agency.
Yeah,
Yep, and then for a project in Lacey.
yeah,
Could you use lodging taxes for the senior center?
no.
No.
Has to be
tourism related.
You don't have partnerships really on there, and I know that's outside of this, but I think when we were at the senior center, they talked about potential partners to come in and assist with that. I don't know if that's really under grants or we can include partnerships, potential partnerships.
Or which one?
The senior
For the
center?
senior center.
Cause I feel like that's gonna be similar to what you have for the North Thurston Public School partnerships like we have for what's going in for the education.
Young Child and Family Center.
The family center. I think that Virgil Clarkson's gonna have to be something similar to that where we bring multiple entities in to talk. Cause it's a very large group of individuals who need service that they obviously aren't getting all of the services they need. So it might,
That's a good point.
I think the partnership part for that would be great.
Great Park?
I would do grants for that, as well as committed and assigned reserves and Metro Park District. That's my opinion.
Everybody agree?
And that,
Just,
I guess the question is how sustainable and reliable would it be for grant
Not.
funding?
Not.
But that's the goal of it.
Because it's new, it would stand a chance. Except for the M&O piece, that would have to go somewhere else.
I'm sorry, I just heard that as MNNOP. I'm not laughing at you. Not alone.
That one would be covered by North Thurston.
right? Or does Lacey Parks and Rec have that?
That would
So
No one
the
just gonna be
concept with
Lacey.
the Young Child and Family Center is that Lacey Parks would come in with that outdoor component of the project.
On the ground though.
Yeah, it'll be in.
That's why it had its own line item.
It's on the ground.
Been there then.
So decide the only grant.
Yeah, I think so.
Why? Grants are just so tough and.
Well, and I will say that, you know, I don't think we will ever not apply for grants. That's always.
Yeah, this is for actual long-term sustainable, but if grants are.
Wasn't the replacement come
It's
from
rent.
reserves? The Huntermore?
Oh, I think they're up on the top. Are we going to Huntermore now?
Oh, I thought you there.
I think so, unless, I
I
mean,
think
we
so.
can go back unless.
I think we should do sponsors and donations on Huntermore, because if we're turning that into Midtown, that like having that as a venue area, because that's what it's turning into correctly with all the apartments being built. And you're gonna have intercity transit, gonna have access into there. Also all those businesses going into the bottom of it. What we have now for Lacey and Tune, we have donors that are willing to partner with us. I think we broaden that a little bit and put more into those businesses, supporting them more. So I like the sponsors and donation, and it also kind of asks them to participate in helping keep that area going and growing. It's an investment in that space. We have business and partnerships with them. I think that could be a long-term donation and sponsorship in that area. Bill, yeah, because I think it's in a very strategically located area. I think we get that. What about anyone else?
Oh,
I mean, Metro Parks, sort of,
PD?
I mean, like, that's like the
Metro,
obvious all the way down.
MPD. Yeah, I know.
All the way down.
MPD for sure.
MPD all the way.
Okay, here's a question. With Huntermore Park, with Lacey and Tune, with all of these other things that go on there, could lodging tax be applied to that area as a tour? Like, do people come here to see the Christmas lights? Do people travel to
The
Lacey
barbecue
to do the
festival.
barbecue festival? Do people travel to
Lots of
Huntermore Park
people from us.
to experience the shows in the park or the
You're making it a
whatever the
destination.
fireworks? I mean, does that translate to the definition of a tourist location and therefore make Huntermore Park eligible for lodging tax funds?
It could, I think it might be less,
A liberal interpretation.
yeah, less, a little more harder to justify that over, say, the Rock. But almost all those events you listed are receiving lodging tax funds from
Okay.
from a festival standpoint,
Okay.
not from a facility.
Not from us, but if you said that those events are more robustly attended because of the facilities that are available to the participants, there are restrooms with flush toilets and you can wash your hands and there's somewhere for the kids to play if they get, they aren't engaged in the programming or whatever.
Well, lodging tax dollars is, we have, how much did we, 200,000 more in asks and we had them available?
Got it. So it's
not
more than
real,
it's
yeah.
limited. Got it.
He has some bad.
Oh, got it.
That's,
How many people are spending the night
Yeah.
to participate? Got it.
Yeah, the definition of
Heads on
tourism
that.
is attracting people from more than 50 miles away.
Okay,
So that's the general definition of a tourist.
okay.
Okay, home and park, picnic area renovation.
Centralia probably has the next door, just like community sun fields. They're a good distance away.
Yeah. MPD.
They have,
Nice.
it does, it's just in the middle.
But it's growing. It's confused.
Okay, Lake Point Park.
Same thing.
We have people getting priced out of here.
Agreed.
There too.
Maybe add reserves to Huntermore Park to the points that when he was making, I think that would be, with Lacey Midtown makes a good point.
And Jennifer, you're definitely going to put an X in the grant category on the Virgil Clarkston Senior Center.
A grant from home, Commerce.
Yeah, so we think that probably CDBG and also a direct ask to legislature, probably for that project. But again, just a reminder for this project, for this activity, we're looking for the sustainable funding.
Yeah.
And then
Okay, and then rack soccer field netting.
We had
That's
sponsored
good.
partnership, though. Yeah, we did partnership and sponsorship with Med Uline. Go talk to Uline. They got netting in their apartments over there. I
Also
looked them up in
Logitech's-
their catalog book. How much would it cost us to get the netting out of your catalog book?
The lodging tax for that one as well, since it is at the rec.
Yeah, it should be the lodging tax for that, yeah.
It's
Metro
also-
Parks.
Don't
forget
But the tax is a lot anyway.
You're not gonna get lodging tax for that.
The rack.
No, no.
What was that, Ruth?
So we can take a deeper dive. Yeah, we have slides to show, like based on what you select, so we can keep going through the activity.
Okay, so Rainier Vista Park, pickleball.
Metro. MPD. Big one.
For all of these that have the reserves as an option as well, I mean, there's only so much reserves, right? And then it's exhausted. And there are lots that are committed, so like what is the actual probability that that funding source is actually reliable for even just as this is a exercise in maybes? If it were to be reality, what is the probability that those reserves would actually exist to fund that?
Right, you should consider reserves as one time in nature, so once they're spent,
Yeah.
they're gone forever, so that's a really good point.
I would also say reserves for the last line item as well.
Although it may seem insignificant, you do already have a guaranteed donation from the pickleball club.
Yes, the pickleball people.
It's not a huge, but put a little X there because
It's reliable.
it's a guaranteed commitment. And I will get them if they don't come through. So,
Does that Rainier Vista, does that
Purple.
change anything by having, does that change anything for the Rainier Vista by expanding that? Does that make it a tournament type of event or will that bring more people to the area to play? I mean,
Yeah,
is it going to be a?
We've got a double thing there. Washington State Senior Games, we had over 500 people. And that brings
Wow.
people from out of state. Not just here, people from Hawaii. I mean, it's a big deal. And it's like over 4 days.
So is that a lodging tax one?
I would say definitely.
I mean,
People have to stay.
We give money to the senior games.
I don't know. What about
Yeah.
vendors? Cause do you have vendors for your pickleball games or rental fees? Do they?
They're talking about for this next year.
Yeah, so
It's a permit from the city.
yeah, it's a permit and then the city does see some of the revenue, but not all.
So would that be part of, can we
Like
put
reserve
that on or does that have to be done?
I mean, that would be like rental fees and whatnot, but again, just keeping in mind with this activity, it's more that sustainable.
So we couldn't sustain vendors or anything if we
Um,
bring in a pickleball tournament venue, could like a consistent event, you
Like the
know,
rack.
like if they did it yearly.
I guess you'd have to consider if this, then just under $1 million project could be funded by fees, vendor fees. So, I mean, I would imagine, so that it's like I wanna say it's $500 rental for the facility. And then there would be a cut from vendors if there were, so probably the city would see. Maybe $800 maximum from that event.
But could you get lodging tax for that since they're gonna be bringing in people from every?
Yeah, is
I
there
think, I think lodging tax, we should probably look at some of the slides we have as far as like how much there is annually,
Yeah, it's
because
not a huge-
I know that the more things you add to lodging tax, we'd be like competing against ourselves. Because the RAC sees money, the museum sees money, and some of our bigger events also get lodging tax money.
And it's
But we can
dependent on
get into that in the
beds
next
and
portion.
beds. And so like with some
Mhm.
motels that have been converted from, they're no longer motels, but they're different sites. You know, it's the number of rooms. I used to be on the ACB board as board president, so pretty familiar with that.
I think what I heard is that. Well.
And I don't know if anybody online was commenting. Did Phil have anything to say?
I concur with everything y'all were looking at. There was a
Okay.
couple, again, there was a couple where the the sponsorship stuff, I was like, and then y'all went back on it, so I agree with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is sponsorship donations, some grants, committed and assigned reserves, and then Metro Parks District. That sound pretty accurate? Okay, then we are going to do a little bit more. Yeah.
I know, I keep going back. And then I'm trying to not be in his way. So far, it's working.
Roy's gonna cover lodging tax.
On the 10th, you want me to start trying to do it in line, things. It's really bad. You're a different. I wasn't sure. You want me to switch you?
Okay, so lodging tax. This is a tax, like we said, that is limited to the promotion of tourism or the operations of a tourism facility. It's always right in the middle. So this is kind of a unique type of funding. This is, it goes to an advisory committee and it makes recommendations to the city council. Ruth is actually one of our longtime serving lodging tax advisory committee members. So she could certainly correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but like I said, we do fund a number of city festivals and events, and you can see them listed there. Many of those are located right in Hunterburg Park. There's a great deal of support for the RAC from lodging tax. We're at 188,000 in this year's budget. It's typically 180,000. The 8,000 I think was for a couple of golf carts, I think. So it was one-time capital purchases. The museum has been historically received is one. Okay, sorry. I think maybe you asked for two and only got one. But the museum has also been a city facility that's received a lot of support over the years from this committee as well. In terms of just some statistics and what is available potentially. We are projecting about $566,000 in lodging tax revenue for 2025. We do have a 2025 proposal from the committee that is being considered by the council in its budget. That budget is about $607,000. So the recommendation is to use about $40,000 worth of reserves to get us to that $607,000. In terms of the demand from this source, 2025, we received 30 applications. The total in requests was almost 900,000, so far in excess of what was actually available. So that's lodging tax.
Requests.
Yeah, we had 11 new requests. It was a high number of new requests. So
For any of the 30 requests, Troy, for Lacey Parks?
Probably about 8 to 10. So the RAC, the museum, several of the events that happened at Hunterburg Park, 4th of July was another that we requested funds for.
Yeah, if you go back one slide, so this year, these are the things included: cultural celebration, $10,000, Lacey Spring Fun Fair, 15,000. 3rd of July, these are all city events, Lacey in Tune concert series. The RAC, 188,000 for operating, Lacey Museum, 48,500 for operating. But yeah, so that's what I was saying earlier, if we put in an additional request for LTAC, we would go into that. We would go into the competition of the new requests and our own current requests. Yeah.
That's a small pool of money.
Yeah, so it's relatively comparatively small.
So it's not a reliable source.
So what I'm
of
hearing is
income.
we just need to take that X out of that entire
Yeah, just-
column also.
Yeah, I think so.
Oversubscribed and
Yeah,
it's
Mhm.
mostly for events.
it's overly tapped already as is.
Yeah.
Jim, did you have a question?
On the other hand, could we go back to the slide that shows where we just put all the X's?
Yes. Ready to spend those dollars.
And I will mention that one of my skills is pointing out the obvious. And that is all the X marks under Metropolitan Park District. So if I were staff, I believe that in any report to the council, you'd have to mention that a Metropolitan Park District seems to be receiving a great deal of attention and perhaps support. And so there were past efforts to get one done, very close. And a recommendation might be to try it again.
So he's just jumping right to it, huh? Yeah, that'd be obvious.
That's what Mark said earlier as well. It's realistically the only way forward.
Well, what we could do is provide a little more information for the work group to consider before you move on to your next step. We do have a few slides on Metropolitan Park District. You've seen them before, but it'd be good to refresh. We also have a little model. I think your chair actually talked about the impacts on the average homeowner. We could take a look at that. It's really at the discretion of the work group, how you want to proceed with that. Happy to jump right in there if you want.
You guys wanna go to the MPD?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
Just for, I don't think it negates though that, you know, grants, sponsorships, all of these are relevant, and just because they're not as viable or as repeatable, we don't wanna, I think this work group, it would behoove us to make sure those still become part of our recommendation. Because, you know, maybe it is only 50,000, but it's $50,000. So I think we need to make sure that those stay alive, despite that it's not a constant, reliable funding source.
Right. The MPD is not just an easy button effectively. And you could just forget about everything else.
But some of it's also community outreach, when you go walking up to businesses and you're saying that we're going to do an event here and you want to participate in that, that's part of us engaging with our community members. Are you willing to invest in what you do, not just as a taxpayer, but as a business owner or somebody who wants to go to a restaurant or a cafe? What do you want to see? That's how we get community member input. I think that's part of networking and getting out there. We just may have to talk to people and say, hey, this is what we want to have and we want to see it. So this is what we got to do to get it. It's also communication. Gotta be clear about what the intent is.
I think we'd be, some people, I'm very involved in the business community, and I think some people would be surprised at how much they're very open to that. I hold lots of meetings with business members, especially Lacey business members, monthly, and yeah, I bet there's quite a bit of support there. Not a huge budget deficit that we have, but definitely there's some revenues to be earned.
Yeah, well, it doesn't feel like such a heavy lift when you do your taxes. When you're going to fill that little circle and you're like, well, yeah, I do like having, you know, certain amenities in my area. This is what I'm investing in, that they have a better understanding of the visual, you know, you're investing in where you live.
Exactly.
And what you enjoy doing, so, and the diversity of it, so you get a say in it. The tax, that's what I like. Anyway, sorry, Troy.
No worries, good discussion. So this is an updated number, from what you saw, 6 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. I updated all these numbers with the current assessed valuation. So our assessed valuation for 2025 is going up about $1 billion. It makes a pretty big difference. So we're gonna be at $13.2 billion in assessed valuation across our taxing district. So these are really just 3 scenarios here for you to kind of just give you a sense of what sort of impact this has. The statutory limit again is 75 cents per thousand. It's actually, for some reason in the statute, broken up into 2 different authorizations, one at 50 cents and one at 25 cents. But obviously together they add up to 75. In terms of consideration, it could be anywhere from a fraction of a penny clear up to that 75 cents. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of where this ends up. I think it's, very nice to hear from the committee in terms of its concerns about impacts to homeowners and businesses, and anyone who owns property in Lacey will be impacted by this. So really here you just see three very simple scenarios ranging from 25 cents to 50 cents, 75 cents. So the very maximum we could expect to receive in 2025 would be 9.9 million. That's at the 75 cents per thousand. 50 cents per thousand is 6.6 million. 25 cents is 3.3 million. The levy rate that we took to the voters in 18 was 47 cents. It was 47 point something cents. The consideration there was really looking at what capacity was within the statutory limits for property tax. We were at a much higher property tax level than we are now, so we don't really have that same constraint now, but something to think about in the future if properties start to decline. We've had basically 11 years of pretty high growth in terms of appreciation. That's probably not going to last forever. At some point, values are going to come down, but we're certainly not in the same situation we were 6 or 7 years ago.
Question?
Yes.
Yvette, I have to pick up a spouse who doesn't have a car supposedly at 7:30, so I would just like to say, for me personally, I need to know how much we need. Just kind of underlining what I've already mentioned to you. What is the need? Any considerations you want to give in terms of historic funding patterns, et cetera? What's the objective here in terms of what was that term, filling the gap?
Yeah, fill in the gap.
Filling the-
Fund the gap.
Fund the gap.
Copyright and trademarked.
Yeah.
And so hopefully you could help us as we go into our final series of meetings to zero in on the target number.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe staff, or at least myself, has maybe a slightly different perspective on that. I think we're talking about the chicken coming before the egg. So think about combining the need or the gap with what this work group sees as its priorities and how far down the list, and the appetite for how much we want to ask for. So
Well, that last one I agree with, but on the first part though, I mean, we already have a capital improvement plan that people a lot smarter than me have put together, and that represents where we want to go in terms of capital needs. And so I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel on that.
Sure. Well, I personally don't think it's gonna be possible to fund the full $71 million in the PCIP. Just in terms of affordability, considerations on impacts to property owners or whatever source, $71 million is an astronomical number.
What was the last, the Metropolitan Park District on ballot issue in 2018? What was the levy rate that was in that?
47 cents. It was about
47?
47 cents. I think that was going to generate around 4.5 million, I believe.
Yeah, 47.50 there. That's.
Well, our assessed valuation was quite a bit lower in 2018.
Yeah, I mean, that's population is real different.
It's doubled in the past 4 years effectively.
And see, that's where the prioritization piece comes in for this work group is, and like I said, like right sizing that from the PCIP, so.
And I think the reality is staff, even if we had all the funding available, I don't think we could build $71 million of projects within a 6-year period. We had Ashley Smith here a few weeks ago talking about that long lead time, so really, I think it's a balance that this work group needs to look at in terms of what it wants to prioritize, how much we think we get done, how much appetite we think is out there in the community to support these as well. It's likely going to come from some new revenue source, and like I said, I think the work group has got the right thought process in terms of, affordability. I mean, housing is a big issue in our community and everywhere, and certainly want to be aware of those impacts.
And this would run for 6 years, correct? So that would come up
There
again.
is no sunset on
Let's go to the Parks District now, yeah.
Oh, so if we put it in as the ask for 50 cents, then is this come back up for levy again and
No,
never
it's
again?
ongoing funding.
But could there be a measure to increase or shift with that funding, not the 50 cents or whatever? Say it lands at 37 cents this time, because it polls that would be like passive or something. Is there a way to augment that later on and increase that or vote to increase that? Or is it just sort of like in perpetuity, it stays at that, whatever that initial funding stream is?
Whatever the levy rate that is in the ballot title, that will be the ceiling.
Okay.
So if it is 37 cents or 50 cents, valuation as it fluctuates impacts that rate. So if valuation goes down, the rate goes up.
Okay.
So if we're in a situation where property values are decreasing, that levy rate could very well hit that limit.
Okay.
But as long as property values are staying consistent or they're increasing, that rate will go down or at least stay the
Okay,
same.
so if house prices go down, then the tax goes up to maintain a steady state of funding stream.
Right, so, but we will be limited by whatever that levy rate is outlined in.
That is passed, got it.
But that represents, of course, an annual figure then.
Correct. Those are annual figures.
Okay.
We're noting even at the highest point in 7 years, you're not gonna hit that $81 million that we need for all of the work group stuff to happen,
That's why we're picking the top 10.
right?
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear on how that worked. If you're gonna say we're gonna pay for this as our taxes, that we're able to explain it for one. And then how it benefits or how it would change, that it's not, it's not gonna be forever, ever, or it is forever, ever. You have to be able to forever, ever. It's forever, ever.
What's great.
This work group could also recommend for, whatever, just for purposes, 2025, let's just use the 9.9, just for purposes. Here's what we're to spend that 9.9 for 2025. Here's where to spend it for 2026. Here's where to spend it. So we could recommend, here's maybe our immediate priorities, here's our second year priorities, here's our third year priorities. So we could do that kind of stuff, correct?
I think it
You
would give
could
us better.
recommend it to the council ones that decides it, right?
That's right. It's the council will have
Recommendations,
recommendations.
yes.
But I think it offers clear guidelines as we move forward, because now you've got a something that's more steady and substantial, that's sustainable, that we can actually put our hands on, right? Because we don't have anything right now. So at least having something that's investing in our legacy, so that won't be here forever. Trying to invest in the future.
Something that's not in our slides, but something for the work group to consider or to be aware of is this district is authorized to issue debt. So you could take a portion of the annual amount and suggest a certain amount of debts. Really, that's really at your discretion in terms of how much you might want to go towards replacement projects, how much of this funding would you like to see go to maintenance and operations of our facilities, what portion might go to debt. You could even make recommendations, how much should go to capital versus operations. There's really a lot of flexibility here, but depending on what level that, we can look at different scenarios in terms of what sort of debt could be generated, how much principal could be generated, but really there's a lot of different scenarios this work group could consider.
I think the opportunity that it has the ability to issue debt is huge. That is something that, down the road that we have that availability to do is really, we don't have that in any of our other options. It's just not there.
Yeah, lodging tax, you have to pay for it and turn in after it's been paid for.
When you're at the mercy of people getting anything.
Provided we decide on one of these and take it to the voters and, are successful, what's the turnaround time in us saying, council, here's a recommendation, them agreeing to the recommendation, getting this on the ballot, getting money?
That'd be the next.
Because it seems like in 2018, maybe we didn't have enough time. And so we don't want to shortcut that and, take a risk.
I can only speak to, I run bonds and levies for the district, and I have for several years. And we start 4 or 5 months out, 6 months out, start planning. Because there's money involved in running a campaign or a measure. And so, yeah, there's a lot of planning that goes into it.
And just to clarify, that's separate than the city's process of sharing the information. So the other side of it.
Right.
Right. No, I think that was a consideration in terms of the timeline and the direction that you asked of this work group. So coming into year end 2024, so the next 2 months, you make your recommendation. That gives the city a lot of flexibility to plan. There's a lot of strategy that goes into a voter approved initiative. Which election you choose, we like to look at what other taxing jurisdictions are doing as well. We don't want a competing tax increase, so that, you know, really, I think the timeline really sets up the city quite well with coming into year end and hearing your recommendation and giving plenty of time to plan and.
So they'll choose, if they choose to accept, and if we choose to make a recommendation on them, then council will decide, oh, we're gonna do, I'm bad, I always forget when the next election cycle, then that's up to council, and then hopefully that provides enough time.
But the staff steps away, so that, right, and then it goes into community. That's what they were telling me earlier, that it's gonna leave here. And then it's gonna be given to community to be the voice of this going out to the community. So it's based on what we say to the public. The city is not going to put something out that says, this is.
We
what-
can't run it, no.
Our role is to provide information. Yep.
Yes.
Just to be
Clear, yeah.
And then just to be clear on this group's role, this is a city council ad hoc committee. So this is not a campaign group. This is obviously in a
Right,
separate.
we're just making our recommendations,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
they choose.
Different group
Right.
for the other kind of stuff, so.
Okay, well, I know we're over. Did you have anything else, Troy or Jen or Jenny? That you wanted to
Well,
present?
I think we heard, and I'll let you guys chime in as well, just in kind of seeing the next steps. And we know that we need to merge the act of prioritizing with the funding options and merge those two together, because we use these projects just as an example. Those are obviously not the final decision of this committee. So just, curious what you all need. I mean, one thought, at least for the prioritization piece, is to use a Menti poll. Denny's got the notes over there.
Right. So we need to create a prioritized project list. So there's a couple ways to do that. We could do it with an electronic Menti poll. That would be everybody doing it individually and then electronically merging so that we have a consolidated list. We could take your previous list, come up with a staff kind of assessment of how that landed, bring that to you, and then as a group, have you guys discuss it and reorganize it. But keeping in mind that you guys took very different approaches to how you did that, so the starting point would be a little bit rough. We could do or some other option as a starting point for prioritization.
The challenge though is how much money if we have 500,000, this would be a recommendation, one of us might make. If we have 5 million, this would be a different recommendation. And so to suggest that, the voting members would have a singular list, like here's my 1 through 10, it's gonna be dependent on the amount of money that's available. And so I'm thinking we have to have iterations of it. If we don't pass anything and we only have, reserves, here would be our recommendation. If we do pass Metropolitan Park District, here was I think they're not the same list if they, I don't know. I just think it's a different list depending on how much money is available.
I don't know, I kind of see it a little bit differently. I think about prioritizing what the community wants at the forefront of every single conversation that we're having. So whatever money it is, it's being a little bit more broad in what we're asking for. And then depending on what our revenue is, we're allocating funds to what the community wants, but it's not as specific
and what we're sharing with our community. I mean, that's kind of similar of how we go out when we run our levies at North Thurston. We base it on what the needs are, but we keep it very broad because we are gonna meet those needs, but we're not specifying specifically it's gonna go to this, this, this. But it's gonna meet the need of sports fields or outdoor space or an indoor facility. Security is, yeah.
And then also part of this is what type of funding we're gonna recommend, correct? So not just the allocation but what type of funding.
I think doing it electronically and then coming back in and seeing how it falls together.
One of the things that would help though, if we did it individually, is to have kind of a agreed upon criteria. Our group had done that and that helped us to come together with our prioritization. So if we could agree on, the criteria, I think that would be very helpful.
I do like the idea of mentee because I think sometimes some people's voices might be stronger or louder than others and there's no pressure and you can really say, do what you truly feel. I use those a lot and I kind of like those personally. I don't know what everyone else does, but.
Is that gonna go back through all 29 again, or is that just the 10? The top 10?
No,
Just the top
no, it
10?
would be all of the 29.
Oh, not
just the top 10?
No, we have
It would
to,
be all of them, yeah, we just use that for an exercise to go through like how you would fund certain projects.
Oh, okay.
Just kind of get a sense of
That's a
that,
thoughtful
so.
exercise. Yeah, well, now you get to do it too. I'm so excited. You should be, it's fun. Can't wait.
Would we do this just with voting members though, right? Not as non-voting members, correct?
I think everybody would do the electronic survey, and then the voting part would be, here's the actual list, here's how you all prioritized it. Do you agree? And then the voting members would vote on the actual.
Yeah, the mentee poll is, like Jenny said, more like a survey than an official vote. So,
Right.
just a tool to use.
I like that.
And then we're looking at it as a group after we get the survey results back.
Yes, yeah, it wouldn't be a final, it would be, here's what we heard, we'd bring you the list, and then there could be discussions about it afterward too.
Then we can look at the, like we touched on briefly, just what it would look like to the average household, homeowner too, next time.
Are we all good?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, then we're gonna adjourn this meeting at 7:42. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
So